was first and foremost, my work was a 1968 proof that any purported economy subject to this obfuscation of our currency inevitably terminates itself under insoluble debt as a consequence of an implicit obligation to maintain a vital circulation by perpetually borrowing principal and interest back into a circulation, with principal restoring any former sum of debt and interest increasing any former sum of debt by so much as periodic interest then on an ever greater sum of debt until such a system inherently terminates itself under a sum of falsified indebtedness, which in fact escalates at an inherently escalating rate. So the first part of this is an inherent failure, which is what so many of my plagiarists have, borrowed from without even being able to articulate the problem. But yet virtually all of the plausible monetary reform today advocates an eradication of interest without even explaining truly why. And all that borrows from my work, my original work. Mathematically perfected economy then solves the problems of any such obfuscation as is imposed by the central banking systems of the world by counting all prior payments of interest instead toward principal and restoring or reflating a vital circulation by crediting the accounts of the people. So there's no as Fred has offered Bill Still's purported solution, there's no need to convert Federal Reserve notes, so-called, which of course they're not. They're really truly the promissory obligations of the people. Originally, in fact, the Federal Reserve was obligated to redeem these representations of the promissory obligations of the people in gold or silver. They used to say this note is legal tender for all debts public and private and is redeemable in lawful currency at the United States Treasury or any Federal Reserve Bank, which lawful currency was gold or silver, which is an admission on the very notes that they're not constitutional money. What happened is they issued more and more of them because when you subject a currency to interest, you have to issue more and more and more. Now that isn't because it stays in circulation, because you're paying principal and interest out of a circulation, which is comprised at most of only some remaining principal. Nonetheless, you have to issue more and more and more money. And so as they did so, this money became, and of course as you have to do so because you need to sustain further industry, nonetheless then we exceed the gold and silver reserves that these notes can be possibly be redeemable in, and therefore you inevitably abandon gold or silver standard, which is then a consequence of either or both the faults of this falsification of indebtedness upon which interest is imposed, or the faults of the precious metal monetary standards as well, which cannot sustain further industry without aberration because they fail to maintain a perpetual one-to-one relationship between remaining circulation and represented property. So inevitably a gold or silver standard fail because of their own deficiencies, but when you couple those with this falsification of indebtedness to a mere publisher of further representations of our promissory obligations upon which they impose interest, you have a perpetual multiplication of falsified indebtedness in proportion to a circulation or remaining capacity to service this ever escalating sum of falsified indebtedness until you suffer the present terminal failure. This is the very cause of the present global monetary failure. My work predicted this in 1968. The computer models I provided the Reagan administration actually calculated it with extreme accuracy, which depended even upon those models exercising logic, which ratcheted down interest rates as we breached terminal failure, reducing interest rates to where we were just within sustainability again until, it stretched out the lifespan of the system until outstanding interest rates, which are the minimal rates that can be charged by intermediate banks to we the people, the end users of this obfuscation of our very own promissory obligations, until those interest rates then remaining rates were inevitably terminal, which is our current situation. In fact, my work even projected all the means of what I call artificial sustention. That is, how a government would have to attempt to artificially sustain the lifespan of this crime that they have imposed upon us by basically pouring money into circulation, accumulating further federal debt beyond what we can service in order merely to maintain a vital circulation that the private sector can no longer maintain because we have exceeded our creditworthiness and we're no longer worthy to borrow further, and particularly so much further as we would need to maintain a vital circulation beyond terminal failure. So we're basically in a temporary final part of the lifespan which can only be artificially sustained so much further, and unless we get someone into office who will adopt mathematically perfected economy immediately, we can by our gravesite. We basically are persisting in a redundantly terminal path which has never been justified, which cannot be justified. In fact, people for mathematically perfected economy has outstanding actions against central banks of the world who have proven unable, indeed, to prove that they ever give up any lawful consideration whatsoever that could be legally construed to comprise the debts which we say, indeed, are falsified to the purported banking systems of the world. All they do is publish further evidence or further representations of our very own promissory obligations to each other. So interest is terminal. Eradication of interest is necessary. Bill Stills has even adopted this thesis, which comes strictly from my work, and I doubt he could even articulate it correctly. I'm sure he'll probably try and study that up a little bit, but nonetheless, mathematically perfected economy is the only solution for inflation, deflation, systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property, and inherent, irreversible, and therefore terminal multiplication of falsified indebtedness by interest. How does it solve?
Yeah, it makes our labor. It makes the labor that generates all that economic activity. It makes the labor useless. It denigrates it and
you're absolutely
puts it down
correct.
to the bottom of the value scale. So with the mathematically perfected economy, the labor of the individual becomes the exalted energy.
In truth, mathematically perfected economy monetizes the labor of the individual, and you've said that very well.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Gosh, I so enjoyed it. I think Fred's back with us, but I'm so glad you came back on with us, Mike, and really love hearing what you have to say.
Well, it's been a long battle. I'm disappointed to see these people running for the office of president without a solution. And, when I speak publicly, people actually literally beg me to run for president. And yet I don't know that I'd ever even think about that unless the people were ready to elect an advocate of solution, who can prove solution by such a landslide that, one of those historic anomalies doesn't eliminate the possibility that we'd prevail in that cause, which we will one day. I mean, mathematically perfected economy is inevitable. It's a simple problem imposed by criminals upon us, which is persisted by criminal government, by no more than evasion. None of these people, Ron Paul included, will answer to a proposition of mathematically perfected economy. I mean, I just contacted the Perry and Bachman campaigns again today. Both of their campaign regulars had shown tremendous interest in mathematically perfected economy, which tells you where the people are at. But the pretenders, the figureheads, the talking heads who are parading themselves as saviors before us and haven't an iota of proof that they can save us. And none of these people can even explain how you could maintain a vital circulation subject to interest without perpetually multiplying falsified indebtedness in proportion to a circulation, and to suffer the very circumstances we are today. I mean, it is so hysterical to watch Mitt Romney argue with Rick Perry about who's got the best business model without giving us a single principle which could possibly prevail in creating jobs. Governments do not create jobs. They destroy jobs. And if any jobs can return to us, it's only by reducing the crimes that government commits against us in the very act of this so-called Federal Reserve System.
Yeah, and unfortunately, election fraud, and I won't say voter fraud because the voters, for the most part, think they're not doing anything that's aberrant, but election fraud is the insurmountable challenge of the person that wants to vote in the proper candidates. Wants to restore
that's another thing that this mandate that I've authored and we're working to get online. I really need. I hate to hear these other people ask for money, and I hate to ask for money even worse myself. But truth is, we need someone to step forward. I'd rather have a data center provide us with the hosting costs for this mandate, which is a worldwide mandate for mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation, are going to cost me anywhere from a quarter to $500,000 a year. So we need someone to step forward and provide us web hosting by which we can host, the political tools that I put together for this have required over a year of programming so far. They're possibly some of the most, powerful political tools that have ever been created. But in this mandate for mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation, we're addressing election integrity as never before. We're actually prescribing how to establish publicly confirmable elections, which are a software process which is confirmable by every person participating or affected by the election.
Awesome. Great. Good to hear that. Are you back with us, Fred? Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I had to leave the house, guys, because we have a relative staying in our lower part of our house. And everyone complains that my voice resonates so loud that I had to escape to the sanctuary of the car and drive a couple of miles to the nearest hotel parking lot.
Oh gosh, Ted, we were having this really nice conversation, and you're there. Oh, that's priceless.
I told you I had to do some moving around. So
yeah, a little more than usual.
Yeah, thanks for those plates spinning, Diddy. And
yes, no problem. It's great. Oh, boy, Fred, that shows a lot for your dedication and commitment. Kudos to you.
Hey, Mike, I kind of was listening as I was moving around and driving to this new space, but it sounds like, this is, at its essence, at its core, pretty simple. This is not complex.
No, it is simple.